folks. I'm here again today with Ross Meeker from the OSU Extension Office in Ross County. I'm Liz from the Chillicothe and Ross County Public Library. And today Ross is going to be talking to us about putting your garden to bed and things that you can do in the fall to prepare for a successful spring in the garden. So go ahead, Ross.
Hi, everyone. Again, thanks, Liz, for having me today. I'm always glad to be here. And I want to thank everyone for bearing with me as I'm dealing with some connectivity issues, but we will work through them. So today we're going to discuss putting the garden to bed and what we should be doing, not only in a vegetable garden, but in our flower beds to prepare them for the winter and set ourselves up for success in the spring. Also touch on some things we can do to improve our asset moving forward. And so, like I said, today we're going to hit the garden. We're going to talk about soil fertility and what we need to be doing this time of year for that. We're going to talk about tillage, something I'm not a huge fan of, but we're going to discuss when and how and what we can use that for. We're going to talk about cover cropping for a better spring. I just briefly will touch on pruning, and then preparing flower beds for winter. What types of things we need to be covering, be planting this time of year. And what we need to move out of winter's way, and what things we should be trimming back for the fall. So it's a pretty big list. Some things I'm going to hit pretty hard, and some things we'll just kind of skim through. But hopefully, when we're done today, we'll have you set up well for going into winter. So vegetable garden, it's kind of my favorite part of gardening. College, a fun year in my days, home up there in the winter, doing anything to support life in our garden or in our flower beds. And so we're really a missed opportunity there, and I hope I can drive that home today. So the first thing we need to do in a vegetable garden year is we need to get we want to remove the remnants of this year's production, the rotten and disease. We used to be taking it away does remove those plant materials that have gone through the season can often harbor insects, especially gray monks that out of this year because of how weather laid, and we don't want to carry those forward. And so when we're removing this material, healthy stuff, unpicked fruit that was healthy, yeah, we can put those into a compost pile and allow those to compost properly for a year or so, and then reintroduce them. But anything that's sickly or diseased, or definitely anything weedy, we want to discard entirely and get them out of our way so we're not carrying through. Caution. Starting clean is a lot easier than trying to fix things down the road. It's a pet peeve of mine. A lot of us, not just in the garden, in the flower bed, or we just kind of get in this habit all the time, using science or data to drive what probably the best time to do a soil sample. Very baseline reading. And if we're going to soil sample routinely, yearly or every other year, Fall is a great time to have a repetitive sample because soil test levels can change from the spring to the fall and the summer and the winter. And I like fall. October is great. Pick a date that you can easily remember for the rest of your gardening career and try to be repeatable. And then you can track your improvement in your trend line. Soil's dry right now. It's not overly wet. If we wait till November and December, we're going to have to dry soil samples before we can mail them anywhere, or else they'll mold or the sample bags might fall apart. And last time I tried to dry dirt in my wife's oven, I had to sleep outside. So I wouldn't recommend that. So it's a great time to go out there and pull those samples. If you do so, contact the office. We do it all the time. We have the supplies you need, and we're happy to walk you through those results and help you make informed decisions on what to apply to your soil. Fertility, when we're determining to apply, we want to work within the state guidelines and apply nutrients only when we need them, so we're not affecting water quality or worse, hurting our production. In the fall, there really aren't many things we can apply and really hold them till the spring. So we want to stick with nutrients that are immobile. There's a big long list that I won't go in today, but phosphorus and potassium are two of our major immobile nutrients. And those are things that we can apply in the fall as long as we have the appropriate soil. And you'll see on my slide here a note about CEC. We could do an entire class on CEC. It refers to cation exchange capacity, but it's a result you'll get on a soil test. And as long as that number's above a 5, we're welcome to apply some of those nutrients in the fall. If we get lower than a 5, our soil just won't hold it through the winter, and we'll be wasting money and hurting the environment. We also only want to apply mineral versions of fertilizer, not the readily available stuff that we typically put in the garden. And that's just because it takes them time to weather and become plant available. And so they'll be ready for the spring and not just leach away in winter rains. It's also a great time to apply compost and give the that feeds the microbes for the dormant season. And it's also the appropriate time to do liming or for adjusting our soil pH. All other nutrients, nitrogen, sulfur, any of the micronutrients, those are things we're going to want to hold off till spring. So don't probably avoid buying one of those all-in-one mixes and things, or you're just probably wasting effort at this time of year. Tillage. Tillage is a pet peeve of mine. I don't understand why in today's world we're so obsessed with tillage. With a little bit of practice and care, we can avoid it. It really does a lot more damage to the soil than it improves it. So if we must till, we want to make sure we're meeting the goals that only tillage can accomplish. If we have to re-level a garden, like let's say we have a bunch of squash mounds, or we've hipped a bed to raise it for drainage, and we need to reshape the garden, or if we have drainage issues in general, and we need to divert water, maybe then. If we have a lot of plant material that's just impractical to remove by hand, yes, we can till it under. But it's not a great practice, and not something, the joke most farmers say now is recreational tillage. It makes people feel better, and it looks a little prettier to the guy going down the road, but we're not helping the soil, and we're not improving our chances in the spring. So if you must till, fall's the time to do it. The natural freeze and thaw action of the winter will undo a lot of the damage we have done tilling in the fall. So till now and avoid it in the spring. You might have to till a little to get something seeded, but we don't need to do that deep tillage because we're really damaging soil structure. This is kind of a joke that's floating around the ag community in an attempt to encourage people to use cover crops. And I'm going to spend a lot of time on cover crops today. It's something I'm trying to encourage the use of across the county. But the joke in the ag world is don't go naked. And they're using this to refer to fallow soil. We have a lot of people have the desire, the garden's over, let's till it, let's see bare soil and leave it wide open for the winter. But it's really a big missed opportunity. If you think we're tilling the garden under now in October and we're not going to plant it until May, we're missing half the year. And that's a big opportunity we can use to improve our soil and set ourselves up for more success in the spring. And so the answer to the opposite of tillage and fallow ground, it would be a cover crop. And so why cover crops? What's the point? Why would I go to this effort of planting something that I'm not going to eat or I'm not going to benefit from? There's this big idea, and there's a lot of research that has gone into it more recently than and pretty recent research. It's not all ironed out now that the microbes in the soil, the healthier that population is, the better nutrient cycling we have, and the more nutrients stay in a usable form for plants. During dormancy in the winter, and there's not enough living material to feed the microbes, these nutrients can actually revert back to their mineral form. Well, then when we start again in the spring, it's going to take a lot of time for that microbe population to come back, redigest those nutrients and make them available for our plants. This is true in a flower bed. This is true in a flower pot. This is true in a garden. And so if we can do something now to sustain that life through the winter, we're giving our garden a jump start for next year. And so the whole idea is maintaining that living fraction in the soil and keeping those nutrients that we've worked really hard to put there in place and in a form that plants can use. And so the thing I liken this to is a sourdough starter. Anyone who's made sourdough bread understands that the healthier the starter, the better the bread will be. And so we want to feed those microbes and encourage their life cycle and their their propagation through the winter season. And so here's a little graph this is not tied to real numbers. This is just an illustration that I've put together. The top line, it shows a garden with cover crops, and the axis shows the percent of microbial life thriving in your garden, and the blue line shows a fallow scenario. And so if we're looking at January and February, there's not much going on in the garden because it's cold and life just doesn't do much. But if we have something out there like cereal rye that's alive during that time of year, we're supporting some of that population. And when we move on into summer or April, May, and June, we're spending more time with a higher population of microbes and keeping more of that soil alive and thriving and nutrient cycling. If you look at the whole picture, a garden with cover crops has life more often than not, or is above 40% activity more months of the year than it's not. And if you look at the one that's fallow, it's about 50-50. Well, so if we're alive more than we're not, we're moving forward. If we're 50-50, we're staying even. And if we're moving forward, we're improving soil health. So that's kind of the overriding principle here. And then here on this slide, we're supposed to have a video that I was not able to look at some activity issues today. But we're going to discuss selecting cover crops. And I have an example with me here of what I have been seeding on my garden the past week or so. When we're choosing cover crops for our garden, we want to keep our goals in mind. Next year's goals, not this year's. Cover crops come in 3 categories. There are cereals, legumes, and brassicas. Within those, you'll hear suggestions for thousands of different varieties or species. And people get a little carried away with it. I like to keep things simple. So let's start with the most basic one and the easiest one to get started into if you're new to cover crops, and that's the cereals. And when we're talking about cereals, we're talking about cereal rye, wheat, or oats, or things like that. There are a few others, triticale, spelts, and the like. And what cereals are, they're cool season grasses that are, in our environment, terminal, right? They're going to be done growing in June no matter what. So if we struggle to get them killed in the spring, they're not going to be a problem. What cereals bring to the table is a really strong fibrous root that is excellent at alleviating compaction. You will do more with planting a cereal to relieve compaction than you will ever do with tillage. They can put roots down 48, 50 inches and can really encourage drainage and build soil structure. So cereals are an excellent place to start. The types of crops we're going to want to plant cereals in front of are, I like to think of any vegetable that I would straw. So tomatoes, strawberries, any of my cucurbits, things that I want to straw because we're going to be producing a lot of biomasses. Biomass is what feeds the microbes in the winter. And the added benefit is I have grown my straw in place, and I'm going to have a nice healthy mat to help suppress weeds in the next year. The next category of cover crops, again, I wish I had our video. It was far more eloquent than I am being right now. All right, the next category is legumes. Legumes that we use in a cover crop scenario in Ohio and Ross County, that what I have had success with are clovers and winter peas, Austrian winter peas. Some people call them field peas. I think that's a bit of a misnomer and confusing because some parts of the world call chickpeas field peas. So if you want to order the right thing, order winter peas from November to April. When we're selecting a clover, I like crimson clover because it's an annual and will die in May, and it won't become weedy like some of the others. Some people will suggest hairy vetch. It's another one that has the potential to become weedy, and you'll fight it in your growing season. So I don't recommend hairy vetch. Legumes are great because they have a symbiotic relationship with bacteria in the soil and produce nitrogen. And so if we're going in front of a heavy nitrogen user, like our cucurbits, sweet corn, even some of our carrots and parsnips and things, we can have a huge bump to their yield by providing some natural nitrogen. And it's in a very readily usable form. It's retained well in the root mass of the cover crop, so it's kind of time to plant them ahead of like a pepper or a tomato, where your over nitrogen can encourage them to spend all their effort on foliage. We really want them to focus on fruiting bodies. The last category for cover crop selection is brassicas. Brassicas are a little underutilized in our area. If you Google cover crops, they're the first thing that will show up, but they're kind of hard to time well in Ross County. We tend to grow a little longer than areas north of us, so we don't get them out in time, and we don't always see the benefit from them. When I'm talking about brassicas, I'm talking about things like canola, turnips, daikon radishes, things with a big taproot. And what these bring to the table for soil health are is that taproot, and that taproot repairs and attacks compaction and builds soil structure very, very differently than any of our other previous options, because it exerts a lot of force breaking up hard pans or drainage issues that we've created from tillage, or even just a lot of foot traffic, the paths where we've walked in our garden. These can really turn those around and bring them back to life. The second thing they do really well is they sequester nutrients and tie them up in that root body that other plants won't. Or just not as well. So brassicas are really good at tying up sulfur and nitrogen, and these are things that we typically just completely lose in the winter because they're very mobile and wash away with rains. But we can tie those up in that taproot and have them available for next year. And as they decay through the season, they will time release those nutrients to the growing crop. So cover crops are a wonderful thing, and I could spend a day on them, and I'd love to have a field day and talk about them, but we'll move on. There's a lot to cover. Now we'll move from the garden to the flower bed, and what we need to be doing in a flower bed this time of year. Some of this is going to be a little repetitive, but it's really important if we want to set ourselves up for success next year. We're going to need, again, we're going to want to clean everything up. I've been lazy before and not got things cleaned up in a timely manner, and it really just sets you up for fighting things next year. So again, remove the remnants of this year's production. This is not the right slide. So all your annuals will want to pull out, and then we want to be careful with we've got a lot of leaves falling, a lot of leaf litter, a lot of lawn clippings that have been blown into our flower beds. We're going to want to remove those in either compost them properly or discard them entirely. This is just an excellent place for critters, insects, and disease to grab a foothold and carry through winter, and we just don't want that in our flower bed. Or otherwise we're going to be starting in a hole. Things to cut back. I get a lot of calls in the office about, should I cut this back? Should I not? There's a list that OSU has and of almost everything in the state, but some things we want to cut back completely to the ground, and some things we want to cut a little higher to leave room for frost protection. And then a lot of things we need to not cut at all, even though I know that it can be unsightly until spring. And that's just the nature of how those plants behave. And so here's just a short are daylilies and daisies. I think those are kind of the most common ones. In spring, this one, I know it really irritates people, but like our black-eyed Susans and the wildflower plantings we have across the county, a lot of people are tempted to want to, oh man, that's starting to look rough. I want to go knock it down before Christmas. If we want to do what's right for the plant and we want that to be a thriving, reseeding scenario, a lot of those things we need to leave alone and allow it to stand through the winter. Hydrangeas, I think everybody knows that you don't cut your hydrangeas till spring. I think they look just fine standing in winter. They dry out and turn kind of a pretty tawny color. I think they have their place even in a winter landscape. And then now for our next video we were not able to load. Hopefully, I will get those posted to our OSU's Facebook, and I encourage everyone to go find those, and I'll send a link to Liz so we can get them shared with you all. But we'll go over how to plant a bulb today, because it is the time of year. Not just in the flower bed, it's actually time to be planting garlic as well. So back to the veggie garden, it's a great time to get those things started for next year. If we're digging up bulbs, or if we're picking them in the store, the rules for selecting the ones to move are the same. We want to make sure I'm on camera here. We want to find good examples. This is a daffodil that I bought at the store. They should be heavy for their weight, or heavy for their size. Make sure I'm holding it right here. You want to make sure that they're firm when you squeeze them. This bag, I was honestly kind of disappointed at them. I picked them up at a department store, and several of them had gone punky or squishy around the crown. And so I ended up having to discard almost half the bag. But several of them are firm and nice. Whether or not we're talking at this is a daffodil bulb, which is quite large, or a crocus bulb, very small. The rules apply clear across them, although these are kind of hard to tell if they're heavy because they are so small. When we're planting these, they're really easy. And I love them because they're an excellent thing to grow if you're like me and you're kind of a lazy gardener, because these are going to look great in the spring and they don't take a lot of love. The rules are simple. Bury them 3 times the depth of the bulb. Now, looking at this daffodil, that'd be pretty far down. I wouldn't count the neck of it, just the main bulb. So maybe the width, 3 times the width of a bulb. And then we want to make sure when we're sticking them in the ground, we're orientating them upright. That's how they would naturally grow, and we don't want them to expend a lot of energy trying to figure out which way's up. The deeper we plant these, the greater our chances are for multiple year success. When these grow, they're going to produce new bulbs right next to them. They don't spread out very far on their own. If you want to widen a bed or something, it's going to take some digging and some moving around to get that done in a timely manner. The neat thing about bulbs, we're welcome to layer them. If we're planting outside or in a planter on a porch, we could go really deep at 3 inches with here a daffodil, and then on top of it place our crocus, and then between them you could place a tulip, and you could have a very diversified flower bed that's going to have blooms. See, daffodils, March, April, June, maybe even into July, we'd still have some happy blooms just with that 3-way mix. They don't take a lot of fertility. When you do plant them, I would encourage you to go ahead and stick some down in the soil, especially some P and K. Not a whole lot of nitrogen this time of year. You're going to lose it anyway. Save that for in season. Other things to make, or points to make with bulbs. Oh, remember, this isn't a seed. This is a dormant plant. And so don't be afraid to stick them in the ground. They've got a lot of energy. It can come up through a lot. And the deeper we move them in the ground, again, the greater our chances of success for multiple years are going to be. Garlics, if we're working in the veggie garden, don't plant things you find at the grocery store. Go find a reputable plant dealer online, Burpee, something that has garlic that is adapted for our region. Um, even though something might, labels in the food world don't always reflect what cultivars they are. And so something might say, summer delight, and it may not be what you want to plant from the garden. So make sure if we're ordering edible bulbs, for the garden, that we're not using something from the grocery store. But again, that video, I have one of me actually planting them in a little more detail. We'll get that posted to our Facebook page as soon as I get over my technological hurdle. We'll get back to I'll get that to Liz. So I think we'll flip back to our PowerPoint. Flower beds. A lot of people, it depends how you're approaching your flower beds. I know my in-laws do their landscaping around their house. Their flower beds are set up so that they have some perennials, and then their annuals, they have used the kind of the interchangeable pots. So they go buy a pre-made pot, and they set it in. We're not really worried about soil amendments in that scenario because that's coming with the plant, or we're using a prepackaged fertilizer in season for that. But if you're like me and you're leaning towards more perennials and more direct seeding of annuals throughout the season, mainly because I let my kids do it, it's great to treat that flower bed just like a garden and use this time of year to amend our soils. Right now is an excellent time to be adding compost to our flower beds and really improving the soil structure and what we have available to our plants the next year. And the whole reason I like to do this in the fall is we're giving the soil microbes a lot of time to get things broken down and digested so that they're available for the plant. The natural freeze thaw action of the winter does an excellent job of loosening and incorporating things on a microscopic level that we don't see. And so getting those things out there now will really set us up for success. We also want to be addressing pH issues. Again, if you're in a completely artificial media, this isn't something we're worried about. But if you're direct seeding into a flower bed, or maybe something farther away from the house where it's not as cared for, get a soil test and address these things properly. Again, we want to be liming now. Lime, even some of the flower bed limes are not milled small enough to be useful in Ross County soils because we have a lot of clay, a lot of silt. And so we need that freeze thaw action to break up those lime particles through the winter. And we really don't see effective or the change in pH from lime until it's been incorporated for 3 to 6 months. And so if we're trying to fix things for next year where we may have had an issue this year, well, we need to get it out today or we won't see it for another year. So it's just an opportunity to do that. Mulch. I know a lot of us are tired of the garden. We're tired of working out there. This is the time of year you'll see a lot of commercial guys doing mulch. In one, it lightens the workload in the spring. You can do a lot of your heavy mulching now. In the spring, you might only need to do a fluffing to bring that color back. It also allows us to put a nice layer, especially if we're using darker colored mulches, that are going to provide some heat and insulation for our perennial plantings with those underground structures that we need to protect from a deep freeze. I don't have a crystal ball, but the almanac showing that we're going to have a pretty severe winter. I don't believe it, but we should be prepared. And so we're going to want to make sure that we're covering either with mulch or a dark plastic to kind of retain some heat and shield our perennials for the year. Now, we don't want them to dry out, so I'm not saying go out and cover them with a piece of rubber or something. That it's going to need to breathe in the winter, even when we're fallow. Soil needs to respirate. So mulching is probably a healthier option than just covering something with a rubberized cloth or a weed mat. Now, you would be just fine to use a geotextile of some sort, some fabric that's going to help retain heat and suppress weed germination, because if we add a fresh layer of mulch or stuff, we're really impeding those surface weeds and those grass seeds and those little tiny dandelion seeds that are laying right on the surface. And if we can cover them up, we can probably save ourselves a lot of work in the winter. I'm just going to touch on pruning. This is something I normally hit really hard in March, because that's when we need to be pruning our fruit trees and softwood trees right before they come out of dormancy. This is the time of year we need to prune some of our brambles, so our blackberries and raspberries. I said this time of year, probably a couple weeks from now, when they've really entered dormancy. We want to get rid of the weaklings. So anything, I always use my pinky as a rule of thumb for raspberries. If it's a straggler, it's a weakling, something that came later in the season, let's go ahead and remove those. They're not going to bear as much fruit as the big ones, and they're really detracting from the healthier stems as far as nutrients and whatnot. We do want to remove all the dead growth. We remember a lot of our brambles live in a 2-year cycle. The first year they will produce foliage, and the second year they will produce fruit. The third year they will die. And so we want to make sure that we're removing all the dead fruit and dead stems or candles, so that we're not carrying disease forward in our blackberries and raspberries. Now, bushes and other woody perennials, we do want to make sure that they're entering a hard dormancy before we're trimming them. We want to make sure they've had an opportunity. They spend all summer producing food and sugars in the leaves and in the stem, and then come fall, those things move into the root system. And so we want to give them time to move those sugars and food stores into the rootstock before we trim them. Now, again, for the trees and stuff, wait till March. You're just opening yourself up for freeze damage, especially if you have a lot of pruning to do, things that are going to really stress a plant. Let's wait till the very end of the cold season. That way it's coming out of it and it doesn't have to survive with an open wound through some heavy freezes. And I think with my videos out, we have kind of wrapped that up here at 40 minutes. So, Liz, are there any questions?
I have not seen any questions come in. I had just a quick question about pruning. I know you said that you usually cover that in a little more detail. Can you just repeat a little bit what you said about the difference between spring pruning and winter pruning or fall pruning?
Okay.
Like how do you decide which way to go?
Sorry, say that again.
How do you decide what time of year for the different types of pruning?
Okay. So if I'm looking at ornamentals, shrubs, bushes, the small things, not trees. So if we're looking at I'm staring at them out the window. Your shrubs and your bushes, we're okay to do those. Not now. We're still too early. Things are leaves are just now starting to change, and even after leaf drop, there's still a lot of sap and stored sugars that need to move down. So let's think more like Thanksgiving time for our fall pruning. Now, for softwood trees, like our maples, any of our fruiting trees, peaches, apples, plums, mulberries, let's wait until March to do those. There's just too much of a risk of having that open wound all winter. And what will happen is when we've sliced the tree or a limb, even little buds off, we've opened up the cambium layer. All woody plants. It's weird to think in a big old tree there's only a couple millimeters that are alive around that. But when we've opened that up, it's very susceptible to freeze. And when that tissue freezes before the plant's alive and has a chance to scar over, that's where we open ourselves up for disease. The plant can't react to it. So the bigger trees, we want to do that. Now, our woody perennials that we trim back, or even some of our shrubs that we just need to resize at the end of the year, as long as they've really gone into dormancy, the wood is dry, it will snap in your hand. Things that are going to put out new shoots next year, we can go ahead and do those here in the fall, but only after they're in complete dormancy.
All right. And you said that you're going to share the videos that would have been the clips in the PowerPoint.
Yes.
If you send me links to those, I will definitely put them in the comments for this video.
Okay, wonderful. Again, I apologize to everyone. Technology has not been my friend today. I have the videos on right here. They just won't upload. So we'll get those shared not only on the Extension's Facebook page. We'll make sure Liz has those links as well.
Yep, and I will share those out. Well, thank you again, Ross. And we don't have any more garden programs scheduled for this year, but I hope you'll be back with us in the winter, spring time.
Always happy to.
Great. Thanks again.